Chapter 22. Thursday, 6 p.m. Baiting the honey trap. Having definitely overplayed my hand, I waited until she was on the sidewalk before running to the house. Once inside, I locked the door to the garage, grabbed a cold beer, and told myself to get cracking on the Home Alone plan. Pushing aside the 3-ring binder of cottonwood rules and regulations for service providers, Ms. Ratchet had left next to my laptop. I made a quick security check. Ms. Ratchet had opened the laptop, tried to log on without a password, and given up. Shaking my head, I went to work. The most important thing to check was whether I could still bring Nikki to me. I took extra precautions since I was sitting inside an FBI sting operation. I found the 2 cameras in the kitchen without leaving my perch at the island. I didn't bother looking for the rest. Instead, I focused on the crucial part. Where did they send their information? Was it being streamed out of the building? And to where? 3 hours later, I knew whoever did the bugging was either cheap and careless or incompetent. Nothing was leaving the mansion. It was all being collected by a server somewhere. Almost certainly the room in the basement Larry talked about. The FBI had bugged the place with decades-old equipment, stuff they probably found in an old box. In a day, I would have completed my work in less than an hour, but I wasn't the man I once was. For one thing, the man I once was didn't drink beer as he worked. Still, 3 hours was twice as long as the job should have taken. Something was wrong with me, and it was getting worse. I found myself operating on autopilot, firing off commands to retrieve information I barely looked at. I was a distracted pilot doing a pre-flight check by just checking off the boxes. My laptop showed IP addresses, routing numbers, and activity logs. I saw a woman staring with quiet desperation through a thorny gap in Russian olive branches. I would tell myself to focus, finally figure out where the hell I was, only to find myself thinking about golf balls lying in the layers of detritus beneath the branches that protected a little girl named Mandy. Then I would remember Riley, the area around one eye a sickening yellow and brown, furiously puffing away as she contemplated a career, lost the moment she met me. I powered through it. Then I pushed my laptop away as more images flew through my head, flashing in and out like a blur of race cars on a track. Kaufman lying face down on the floor, his brains splattered on the wall, pavement flying inches away from my face, a pale arm motioning to me from the darkness, a little girl peering up at me between the thorns, faces of people I would never see again, like Cynthia, and of course Gabriella, whose face I avoided by not looking into windows or mirrors. I shut my eyes, put my head between my hands, squeezed it as though I wanted my head to burst open like a watermelon, and stared listlessly at the puddles of tears glistening on the polished counter. Breathing heavily, I didn't move, afraid the images would come roaring back into my head. "At least it's over," I whispered, until the trembling stopped. A voice inside my head said, "And that's what you've wanted, isn't it?" When I didn't answer, the voice spoke again. "That's what you've wanted, isn't it?" "Yes," I whispered. The voice said, "But it's not over yet, Paul, is it?" I was surprised to hear myself say, "No, it isn't, but it's close. Isn't that enough?" "You tell me," the voice replied. "It's over. I'm already losing it. I don't have enough time to find the bastard. Maybe if I did, we could take a few more Kaufmans off the board and get enough money to have a chance at getting Nikki." "So you're walking away from the plan? All that work for nothing?" I didn't reply, staring into the darkness of the cavernous front entry, trying to remember if Tom Horn came up with the idea of how to fill the war chest, or if I did. Then I grimaced when I realized I was drinking Riley's light beer. But it didn't matter. Good ale or expensive piss, me or Tom Horn, I was out of time. No, I had not found Nikki. But I had found men in Witsec like him and worse. Monsters who would never pay for their horrific crimes. Federal prosecutors like Gibaldi, who was supposed to get justice for Gabriella, treated sick recidivists like Kaufman, and cold-blooded killers like Nikki as though they were trading cards stolen from the crime bosses. With the right cards, Gibaldi could trade up to a game with a higher class of criminals, even ones voted into the highest office. Tom and I planned to build the war chest we would need once we found Nikki. Everyone who watches TV and movies knows that crime bosses will pay almost any amount to keep the Gibaldis from moving up in the world by moving crime bosses to prison cells. Once I found where Nikki holed up, We would need money, maybe lots of it. Nicky could be anywhere in the world and would be protected wherever he was. Collecting bounties on murderers to fund killing a murderer seemed more like poetic justice than simply a means to an end. Yet, now that it was over, I knew I had been delusional. A guy like me wasn't going to find a guy like Nicky, who didn't want to be found. Tom and I had just been kicking the can down the road until the day I was out of time. It was never really the plan, I mumbled. I never said it was. Are you going to finish what you started? I tried to speak, cleared my voice, and tried again. He might not come. He might send someone. That was what was bothering you? But I was through answering questions and pulled my laptop back to me. I wasn't sure what was bothering me, but I would finish what I started long before I knew there was a man named Gregory Kaufman. Out of habit, I glanced at the logs, charts, alerts, messages, and data streams I had collected. I had missed it, not because it was cleverly hidden or camouflaged. Disgusted, I pored over all of it until there was no doubt. Something or someone was communicating from inside the mansion. Worse, the communications were sporadic and irregular, not regulated bursts from sensors, cameras, or phone conversations. There were many possible explanations, but the one that I couldn't ignore, someone inside the mansion was sending messages. Laser-focused, I traced the signal stream and found it came from the same place the camera video inside the house was being sent, the server in the room where Martinez had spied on Driscoll's party. I took a long breath and eased over to my tower, sitting on the island where I had put it 2 nights before. I carried it out to the garage, where there were no cameras, at least none I knew. Placing the computer tower on a workbench, I unscrewed the tower's back panel. The computer's guts took up the top half. In the bottom were standard emergency supplies, money, drugs, and guns. If I was careful, there was enough cash and drugs to keep me off the grid for a month. If I had to resort to theft, I had enough credit cards to last my limited lifetime. A .38 revolver, identical to Larry's spare sidearm, was clipped to one side of the box, and a .45 automatic on the other. Both were, as Uncle Al had put it, clean. The drugs were the usual assortment of high-quality street merchandise that, in certain situations, can be worth more than cash. Everything was clipped into the inside of the tower's walls. A soft canvas gym bag was pressed between the walls to keep anything from rattling. I had practiced until I could remove the back cover and empty my stash into the bag in less than a minute. I pulled aside the gym bag and unclipped the .45. Having more than enough scars on the small of my back, I slipped the gun into one of my cargo pants pockets. I decided to leave the tower in the garage, its back unscrewed, in case I needed to leave in a hurry. Back in the kitchen, I pulled out another beer, opened a bag of potato chips, sat back down at the island, and palmed the .45 under a dishcloth. I had a decision to make. The smart move was to stay in the kitchen and figure out what was happening by painstakingly and systematically hacking into the signal. But having just missed the obvious, my confidence was waning, as was my patience. I decided to go in fast and hard. Ignoring the kitchen cameras, I pulled the dishcloth off the .45 automatic, chambered around, triple-checked that the safety was on, and headed for the basement. 3 steps later, I returned, pawed through my purchases, and finally found the flashlight. Then, flashlight in one hand and the .45 in the other, I headed back down the hall, tucked the flashlight into my armpit, and jerked open the basement door. No one waited for me at the top of the stairs, so I pointed the .45 down into pitch darkness, where an entire crew of assassins could have been aiming weapons at me, standing in the lighted hallway. Almost dropping the .45 into the darkness, I fumbled with the flashlight and found no one looking up at me. It didn't look like a basement. It looked like a dungeon. There was a light switch on the wall just inside the door. Slipping the flashlight into a pocket, I hit the light switch to show a steep, wide stairway made from the same stone as the walls. There was no railing on the stairway that went down almost 2 stories to a stone floor. 100 years ago, people watched where the hell they were going. As I descended the stairs, I ran my hand along the inside face of the stone. The small razor edges of embedded sedimentary crystals were as sharp as the day they were hand-chiseled from the hard sandstone into blocks. Yet, while the stone along the stairway felt freshly chiseled, it didn't look it. Instead of being a reddish-brown, it looked dingy, almost gray, the crevices in the stone, and grout black. Reaching the bottom, I found a storeroom instead of a dungeon, but it was not like most home storerooms. It was not filled with dusty boxes and exiled exercise equipment. The shelving hadn't come from a big box store. Deep black industrial steel shelves over 10 feet high ran along the stone sides of a deep room. Large industrial fluorescent lights hung from the massive wooden beams that supported the master bedroom above. These were industrial shelves, built to hold anything from a lifetime supply of golf balls for every resident in Cottonwood, or enough weapons and ammunition to bring Colorado's incipient socialism to its knees. Yet, other than a thick layer of dust, the shelves were bare, and I didn't see a room with a server, or any other rooms, only shelves. As I walked across the floor, the bottom of my foot caught on something, and I looked down. The floor was the same sandstone as the walls, but chiseled to flatness. There were 2 large drains in the floor about a foot in diameter. My flashlight beam caught a thin line of dark green leading from one of the drains to the shelves on the outside wall. Following the line with my flashlight, I saw a 3-inch pipe extending out of the shelving. At the end of the pipe was a long-handled ball valve. Water dripped slowly from the pipe. Whatever this room had been in the past involved water, and a lot of it. On a hunch, I used the back edge of my clasp knife to scrape away the black from centuries-old coal dust to reveal the original red sandstone. The dungeon had been a steam room that heated the mansion, while the privilege, dressed in tuxedos and gowns, mingled under the immense candelabra. Men, stripped to the waist, shoveled coal into the maw of boilers. I knew something about heating with coal. Coal mines still provide pea coal to their employees and the communities around the mines. The trailer I grew up in didn't have a furnace, but it had a coal stove, which I kept fed in the winter using coal we kept outside in a steel garbage can. People in the trailer park took turns going to the mine, getting a pickup load of coal and filling the garbage cans. They did the same thing in town for the houses heated with coal, only they were able to dump the entire pickup load into the house's coal bin. Modern coal furnaces are unrecognizable from the massive boilers that heated the mansion 100 years ago. Instead of men with shovels, automated augers feed the modern coal-fired home heaters. The coal bin is still pretty much the same, a big concrete box. I was sure that somewhere behind these shelves was a coal bin turned into a hidden room. It was easy to find. A section of shelves directly under the master bedroom sat on rollers. My flashlight beam showed light scratches on the coal dust-stained floor. Was someone in that room? Was this the only way in and out? I pointed the flashlight at the heavy beams supporting the master bedroom. When Driscoll remodeled, had he built over the coal bin? Could someone climb in from a hidden trapdoor outside? There was only one way to find out. Putting my flashlight and .45 on the shelf to free both hands, I pulled the shelf section back as fast as possible. If there had been a hitman, that would have been the end. There was no hitman or hitwoman, only a lonely server sitting on a long white folding table humming to itself. Nor was there a ladder leading up and out of the room. In fact, the room had a standard height ceiling. Whoever was communicating using this server was doing so from somewhere else. Anything was possible, but this was my area of expertise, and it didn't feel right. I bent over to look under the table to see if I had missed a network cable, and found I wasn't alone. I cursed and stumbled back out to the basement to get my gun. It squeaked and ran past me through a rat-sized hole in the corner of the room. Raised in a trailer park in the middle of nowhere, I shared the same hatred of rats as people growing up in city slums. Once I was sure there were no more hiding in plain sight, I examined the camera that had been watching Agent Martinez. Although not cutting edge, it was much newer and better than what was upstairs, and it was motion activated and easily sensitive enough to catch and send back to the FBI videos of a rat without a schedule. This was the signal I detected, and I was right. A rat was hiding downstairs. I sat on Agent Martinez's unpadded folding chair in an airless room smaller than a solitary confinement cell. Isolated in a doorless room, she had heard the muted sounds of the party drifting down from above, while people moved about the house in a dozen small windows on her display. Any meaningful real-time surveillance was a job for a team. Why did the FBI make her sit in the room? It was too much video for a single person to make sense of in real time, and if the surveillance equipment had problems, there wasn't anything she could do about it. I suspected Agent Martinez sat in that little room as an example of what happens to agents who challenge the trophy hunters in the Justice Department. Later, I would find that they had muted the microphone. Agent Martinez had to have known she was to be seen and not heard. While I was hijacking this system, I listened to bits and pieces of those conversations. What kind of strength did Agent Martinez need to sit alone, exiled by her bosses, and listen to people refer to wetbacks, greasers, and beaners? I picked up my .45 from the table where I had set it and quietly bent over to look at the rat hole. Then I suddenly straightened. The rat hole should have been dark, but wasn't. There was another room behind the wall. Once again, I had missed the obvious. This little room was too small for the coal bin required to feed the boilers. There had to be another section of shelves mounted on rollers. When I eased out of the room and looked, there were no more rollers. Quietly slipping back into Martinez's little cell, I couldn't see any sign of a connecting door. When I finally got the courage to tap on the wall, it sounded like drywall. Thankfully, the rat didn't tap a reply. Whatever was on the other side of the wall had to be reached from above, the master bedroom. I remembered my first night in the house. I climbed the stairs and went into the master bedroom. The sun had just set and the room was dim. Shutting the bedroom door, I crossed the room, pulled the blinds, and closed the bathroom door. The light I had seen easing from the floor on my first night was still there. I hiked back down to the hidden room and switched off the light. When I returned to the master bedroom, the light was gone. I returned to the secret room, switched the light on, and studied the dry-walled ceiling again with my flashlight. The outside and end walls had not been drywalled over, and were still stone. I stepped off the length of the room, made the hike back upstairs, and paced off the distance from the back of the house. I told myself I paced it off carefully and slowly to do it right, not because I was out of breath because of Denver's infamous thin air. Then I rechecked my measurements. There was no doubt the hidden room extended from the bathroom into the bedroom and stopped before the space where the light eased out from below. There was a room on the other side of the hidden room, something behind shelves with no rollers. Sitting on the floor in the master bedroom, I pushed and prodded until something moved. A floor panel rotated upward to free another and another until I exposed a handle. Unlike the shelf in the basement, the trapdoor lifted upward with ease. 20 feet below were my rat, its friends, and what remained of a body wrapped in a green tarp. Henry Driscoll had never left the building. The floor sparkled when I pointed the flashlight beam down the shaft. A faint odor drifted up that I recognized after a moment. The smell of a salted animal hide explained what glistened on the floor. I turned off the flashlight when I saw the gleam of white poking from ragged holes in the tarp. The rats scattered when I opened the door further to see that the remodeled bedroom straddled the coal chute. Half the coal chute was inside the bedroom, and half was under the lawn, probably disguised. A ladder from the outside wall led down into the basement. That ladder was easily reachable from the inside. Could someone use this to get in or out of the house? I suspected they could, and damn well knew I would not risk being trapped in a room filled with rats to find out. As I lowered the trap door, I felt a chill crawl up from below. It had to be a hallucination, another sign that I was running out of time. Cold air doesn't rise.